Hello everyone and welcome to Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. We're in a rare bit of sunshine here in West Limerick and I'm with farmer Tom Keane on his farm. Tom, thank you very much for being part of the podcast this week.
Hello, it's good to be here, thanks. Yeah.
Tom, you have a... is she a heifer or a bull?
No, it's a heifer.
A heifer giving you kisses. I think she's trying to get some milk from you. But give us the lay of the land here in terms of we're standing in a field. I think in the distance is the River Shannon. It's very picturesque. You have beautiful traditional Droimeann cattle in front of us, but we'll talk about them in a second. First, if you just tell us where are we and what kind of farming goes on here.
Well, we're on the south bank of the Shannon estuary, between Foynes and Askeaton, kind of on the water's edge really. So the land is all along the foreshore will be designated special area of conservation, special protected area, and we're leasing land next door to us from Rusal, which is National Heritage Area, and that's designated largely because of the birdlife. So anything along the foreshore is designated, and so that would be classed as salt marsh. But inland from that, then you have calcareous limestone, and that kind of interacts as well. There's turlocks, there's brackish lagoons on karst, which is kind of a rare enough habitat. So that's the lie of the land really. And I've been farming. I got a herd number in '97 and started conversion to organics in 2002. So I've sucklers and a smaller amount of sheep then, but primarily it's suckling that I'm doing.
And what made you get into organics in the first place? Because that was fairly early. You know, people weren't converted to organics or thinking about organics at that stage.
I'd say I was probably about the second wave. I suppose when I was getting into it, there had been about maybe 10 years, and I suppose they were the early adopters. I suppose we'd be called the early majority, the people that were coming into it then. I suppose the land being designated would have been one triggering factor, because there was a to-do list and a to-not-do list more so of being designated, but we weren't intensive anyway, so it kind of made sense with the designations, and also kind of we weren't really focused on being intensive at that stage. So my uncle died in 2001, so my brother and myself separately farmed what my parents had, what my father inherited from his father, and what had been acquired by my parents, and then we fell in for most of my uncle's farm. So it was only at that point that I took over a suckler herd. I really was working off farm, had a few dry stock. I was kind of almost like an appendage onto my brother's farm, that I'd take male calves off his and finish him. So it was only then that I kind of went onto my own kind of path, still linked to my brother. We help out in a lot of ways, each other's enterprise, but it just made sense for us at the time to go organic, both my brother and me.
Yeah. And I guess then both of you share a love of Droimeann cattle. Droimeann in Irish means white back or pale back. And I guess people, 100 years ago would have been very used to seeing this type of rare breed cattle, but it almost died out and almost went extinct.
Yeah, I had heard of them. My brother could remember there being a few, like he's 10 years older than me, so he would remember when he was a child in the 60s, there would have been a few that would have come up from Kerry. And my parents came from Kerry, so they would have been aware of them. So I suppose the last kind of numbers of them were in South and West Kerry, and it was purely accidental. It was when my uncle died in 2001. He had been ill for a while, and he was quite elderly, and the land was understocked, and the profile of his herds, a lot of them were only fit to be culled, so we needed cattle to stock the land. And my brother saw an ad in the Farmer's Journal from Jill Smith, who anybody involved in rare breeds will know Jill, and it was Irish Miles she had advertised. So we went down to Carrickline to see them, and there in the middle of them she had what she said were Droimeann, which we had assumed were extinct, or they had not been recognised as a breed, so we didn't even know if there was such a thing as a Droimeann breed, or was it just a type, kind of a mongrel breed. So we bought some, we got talking to others, and eventually a society was founded, and they did get breed recognition on the basis of genomic testing, and the society is in a good place now.
And they're getting more well known amongst farmers as well, aren't they?
They are. I mean, they've got a large, much larger profile, more than the numbers would justify nearly, you could say, but obviously the numbers will incrementally increase. I mean, I suppose when we started off, the biggest fear, you're breeding females, and that you can't keep them all, and that to sell them to people who are committed enough to breed them pure again, because it's you're breeding back from adulteration to purity, but also with being mindful of not getting inbred. So there's a lot of strategic mating that has to happen, and it's kind of having an informed buyer who is in it for the right reasons, and they didn't really have any commercial value. So that has changed now, and I suppose it's the job of the society to keep people informed and to use what science tells us with the genomic testing that happens with each cohort of calves that are born every year.
And I guess for people listening, I mean, farmers will be aware, but for non-farmers, I mean, there was this big pushback against traditional breeds in Ireland for a long time, people favouring continental breeds, even on very marginal or poor quality ground. They'd put these big continental cattle on them that'd be sinking in up to their hocks, sinking in mud. But I think what's nice about the Droimeann is being a traditional breed is, well, you can tell me now, but I think they actually suit an organic system and an Irish system very well, because they're a small compact cow, and they're a dual purpose cow, aren't they? So they could be used for beef and dairy, rather than continental cattle are usually just used for beef and that's it.
Yeah, there's a number of members that are milking them, my brother included. Now, they would be the minority of his herd. It would be mostly dairy short-term. But again, any heifer that I have that looks like she might have potential as dairy, I'll let Michael try her out to milk her, and if it doesn't work, I'll take her back and she'll be extra quiet, having been milked for a year. So yeah, I mean, I suppose it's interesting when you talk to others why they got out of them. I suppose even what I found a few years ago, if you took a Droimeann to the mart, like a male animal, there was no dedicated beef programme, even though the nicely conformed ones, when people didn't know what they were, you were lucky to get a British Friesian price. That's changed now. Obviously there's a boom in beef prices, but now there's a dedicated market for Droimeann beef as well. And I suppose there is an association with extensive and often organic systems, and I know that the EIP schemes and National Parks and Wildlife Service, like not necessarily just Droimeanns, I mean Kerry, Irish Mild, Dexter, or even some of the traditional breeds from the UK, because they're hardy and they're lighter, so they can handle rougher terrain, and they'll graze places where continentals wouldn't be happy, more the uplands and things, and without poaching the land. And again, because they can forage more extensively and they're happier at it, you probably need less antibiotics. Like, I mean, if I think of a problem with livestock, the rules in organics, look, if an animal has an issue, you treat. But if you think that there's a systemic issue, such as fluke or worms, you take fecal samples from a percentage of them. But I'm not really seeing it. Very rarely that I would have an issue creeping in, and I think it's probably the breed as much as anything else. And there again, with all this talk about conservation, grazing and high nature value farming, these animals will deliver in terms of managing landscape. The less antibiotics coming out in the fecal matter, the better it is for insect life, bird life and everything. So there is a more of a focus on that type of farming and a more holistic approach, whereas the continental, and I'm not knocking them, but they are kind of a one-trick pony in many ways that these aren't. Obviously they won't compare in terms of yield of beef or milk, But I think in the round, particularly in marginal land or rougher terrain, they'll achieve more.
And they're very pretty. Like, it has to be said, there's something not just compact about them, but if anyone could imagine kind of, so some, and they're all different kind of colours. There's kind of a blue roan kind of one, kind of speckledy blue and white. There's other ones there, and they're almost pure white with this kind of black panda nose, and it looks like black eyeliner around their eyes and dark eyes. I mean, they're very attractive cattle. It's a shame that they nearly became extinct.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't the market value on aesthetics, unfortunately.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, though, isn't it?
Yeah. No, and I suppose, just in case the neighbours or other farmers didn't think I was a raving lunatic, I leave the horns on them as well, which is anathema for most people. But
then that's interesting, because obviously in organics, if you're disbudding or dehorning, there's certain rules around that, but that you're freeing yourself up from one of those rules and regulations, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do the bulls, to disbud the bulls, because people get more nervous of horns on a bull, but I've kind of stopped that even now. They have them for a reason. I think and again, I suppose it's easy for me. I'm in the driest limestone land you can imagine, and outwintering is a large part of what I do, so that even the animals that are housed, then they're not packed in so tightly, so they're less likely to gore each other. So
I was going to say as well, because in organics you usually have a lower stocking rate, but you must have a very low stocking rate here for your cattle, so it's not a big issue. They're not fighting for space, they're not stressed, they're not using their horns to attack each other. No, well, I mean, I suppose it's situational. I suppose bullying at a feeder would be a thing, and they are hierarchical and asserting dominance, but the farther away they are from each other, the less that will happen. And people will be interested in the outwintering, because in organics you obviously have certain rules around it as well, where you need either access to an outside area for the cows if they're in a shed, or else you need straw bedding. So you're 100% outwintering, are you?
No, I mean, one of the greatest positives with the breed could be a negative. They're extremely fertile, but that means heifers can get in calf as young as 4 months of age, but 5 months of age would be really danger zone. So we're very lucky to have the land leased off Rusal next to us. So when the heifer calf is 4 or 5 months, the cow has already been covered, because they just come back in heat almost without fail, very rapidly. So they're moved there. So for the summer grazing, they're free from a bull, but the easiest way to keep them free from a bull in the winter was always to house them. Now, alternatively, I might leave them out and put any male animals in. I might do it a bit differently, but the one thing I am finding is the cattle are very healthy. And I pulled one calf last year from a cow. I didn't pull any this year. They generally calf unassisted. Now that can be luck. I mean, if there's a leg down or anything, you're going to be pulling. But I think cattle that are outwintered, flexing their muscles, and particularly these type of cattle, they're less likely to need veterinary assistance or even your own assistance. But what I am finding is that the land is, maybe suffering is too strong a word, but definitely the grass is later coming. And then if we get a drought here, we struggle. I mean, most people love a drought in most parts of the country, but if we get a drought, because
of sunshine, farmers are different when they hear a drought.
So like the place just dries up and burns. So I suppose if I can house a bit more, and kind of judge which ones should be housed and for what periods, just to let the land have a quicker flush of grass in the spring. So there's always trade-offs involved.
Because you have amazing wildflowers here as well in your land, so I imagine that's part of your grazing, that you want to kind of not trample down the land a little bit to regenerate it, but you don't want to overload it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, look, kind of the flora happens, and it'd be wrong to take all this credit that we're doing great stuff. I mean, the flora is just here. Look, obviously we didn't reclaim and we didn't reseed, and there was reclamation done, say back in the 80s, but since then no. And some of it is very craggy, and including the land that we're leasing off Rusal is very species rich as well. So a lot of it would survive no matter what, because it's just on karst, it's on limestone pavement. But I suppose by not reseeding, you're leaving what's there, and we get botanists, and they get very excited about some of the plants that they find. Like there was a team of them there in the summer, and they found quite a few that they weren't expecting to find.
Like what? Can you remember any of the names?
Well, they definitively confirmed that the Viola hirta, the hairy violet, which is has a designation that is in the Roussel owned land, and Paulawela is the townland. So I think they kind of knew it was there, but they definitively confirmed it was there. And then on my brother has a field, the long field, and there's one side of it that's adjoining what you would call a fen in a neighbour's field, and that wettish part of the field, it has the bee orchid, which isn't terribly rare, but it's a spectacular looking orchid. But when they went down there, there's a hoary plantain which isn't deemed to be native, and would be a rare exotic, and how it got here is a mystery. And then, but I had known that was there, but then they found this French oatgrass, which they weren't expecting to find, which again is not native, but how it got here, these wouldn't have come in a seed mixture. Say the land would have been reseeded after compulsory tillage during the emergency, as it was called in this country.
Second World War. Yeah.
So that was the last time that these fields would have had any reseeding, and they wouldn't have come in with that. So, and obviously they're not judged to be native, but they were still kind of exciting enough for them to find. But they do find, a lot of the wildflower plants at the Burren, I think all bar one of the Burren plants are in this general area. I'm not saying on
this little pocket of Limerick, kind of.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting as well, because the thing is that if you were anything but organic, if you were using chemical fertilisers or you're doing lots of reseeding, those plants wouldn't have had a chance to grow or to flourish.
No, I suppose if you were really intensive, they wouldn't. There was a period before we were organic, but it was never very intensive agriculture or very intensive spreading of fertilizer. And then there's areas where you just couldn't spread. We're standing in a field here now that's very craggy, and if you lift a rock, chances are you're going to get a colony of ants underneath it. And that's something, again, when you have botanists and entomologists and ornithologists traipsing down, which they invariably do, they all kind of tell you something, and you kind of start observing or thinking about things yourself. And you kind of know the fields that, because they could never have been reseeded or gone under a plough, you'll know that when you lift a stone there, you're likely to get ant colonies, and you start wondering how general was what we see in certain fields here. And there's things you'll get in certain fields or certain pockets of fields here that you won't get in any other part of the farm. And I suppose that was a lot more general in this area. But there's still some really lovely hazel groves in the vicinity, and there's nice stuff maybe a few miles away from here. A large stand of juniper, for example, which is a rarity. So there's nice things in the area, and everybody thinks limestone. They think maybe the Burren or maybe East Galway or Roscommon, but there's a long seam of limestone in Limerick that kind of gets forgotten about.
Tom, we're just walking on a little bit here now, and you have some sheep as well. What kind of sheep do you have?
Well, when I first got into sheep in 2004, it was pedigree Galways, and I've always kept pedigree Galways. I do have a few Shropshires as well, that I use to rotate in and out to another organic farmer who has an orchard, and they're the orchard sheep. But now there's a few Shetland have appeared on the farm, so that's a new thing again. So
and what's the thinking? Is it the wool quality? Are you looking for wool as well? Are you one of the few people using the wool?
Well, I suppose the Galway society has really taken off in terms of their management of the wool, and they've got their bespoke wool product now. But Mona, my partner, does a lot of spinning and knitting and stuff. So, and she's into the Shetlands and the Galways or whatever. So I'm just it's just such a small scale here anyway. Cattle are the main thing really. So
that's lovely to have it, especially when wool has been so worthless over recent years. I guess then, in terms of lambing and calving, do you try to calve and lamb at different times of the year?
I suppose you want the lambing to be kind of condensed if you can at all. You just get it over with, because it is very exhausting. Calving, it's staggered because we're in dry limestone, and because I suppose I'm not a hard taskmaster if a cow does break down or whatever, and they're out all year. And I'm more looking at releasing heifers to the bull when they're a year and 9 months, to have them calving at 2.5, so they can calve the 12 months of the year, which kind of suits me, because I don't want a rush of calves in the spring. It's just purely because I'm on limestone. If I wasn't on limestone, I'd be doing something different, but it's so easy to calve any time of the year, calve out, and you get a good result.
In terms of overall numbers that you have on the farm, how many sheep would you have in total, and how many cattle would you have in total?
Well, cattle of all ages, it's about 80 at the moment, but that's from young calves up to aged cows, and a few of them will be sold fairly soon. Sheep is about just less than 20. So, and again, some of them are for the butcher fairly soon. So, so cattle are by far the bigger part of it.
And it's for you then, the income stream for the Droimeann. I mean, in a way you've kind of created one for yourself, because the breed has been championed, it's recognised pedigree now. So are you aiming to sell all your young stock as pedigree?
Well, pedigree needs a bit of explanation. So because there's a breeding up programme, most of the ones in the herd register would be in foundation grades. So pedigree would be the top tier. So the vast bulk of them would be in the foundation, and there's grades A, B, C and D in the foundation grades. So everything is registered at one grade or another. So I kind of my own replacement strategy, I suppose I try and keep as much of the diverse genetics in my own herd as I can.
So you're not inbreeding?
Yeah. I mean, I had a 100% bull a number of years ago, and I've got a lot of 100% pure animals. And some people do line breeding. I mean, that's the history of breeding, going back to Robert Bakewell, and strategic inbreeding. I'm concerned that there's a limited gene pool, so a little bit of inbreeding will happen anyway. So I'm inclined to go away from that. I'm breeding purer, but to me it's a marathon rather than a sprint, and that it can be difficult to find a bull that will match everybody in my herd. He'll obviously be a much greater fit in terms of inbreeding with some than others, but I try and manage that trade-off as best I can.
Yeah. And I guess moving forward then into the future, I mean, your house and your land is very interesting, like you said before, to botanists and all kinds of people, and had, I think, a farm walk here recently. I mean, what's the plan? Would you ideally like to welcome more people onto the farm?
Yeah, I mean, we're on the Grassland trails of Ireland, and both of us are farming for nature ambassadors. So we've had a lot, say, in the last year. We've had schools, we've had the Irish Wildlife Trust, we've had the council, Limerick County Council, Climate Action Week, Biodiversity Week, and we've had a few farming for nature farm walks. Then we've had students over from Germany or farmers from France. So there's been a lot happening, and it's nice to accommodate people, and just I like it, and because there's a lot of built history as well on the place, and even the land we were leasing off of Hanish, there's a bird hide and there's walkways on that, and so yeah, we'll see where it takes us, but I really like it, and growing trees is a passion of mine, and I'm hoping to set up a nursery. I've been growing trees just for my own use for years from seed, and I probably will do that here as well. So I suppose the more, if you're growing anything commercially, the better it is to have people around maybe buying stock or whatever.
Yeah, so hopefully some more trails. So if people want to find out about you before we finish up the podcast, how could they find out, or how could they come on any of the trails on the farm?
Well, I suppose the Farming for Nature, we had all the Farming for Nature ambassadors had a walk on the end of August, and then we had our own particular one there about 10 days ago. So I suppose we'll be on that, but I suppose the Nature Trails of Ireland, I'm not sure who runs that. I think it might be the National Biodiversity Data Centre, but I mean I'm easily found on Facebook anyway. I just throw up videos of the cows, so I can be found fairly easy. Yeah.
There you go. Well, Tom Keane, thank you very much for that. For everyone listening, you've been listening to Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. For more on organics, you can go to www.irishorganicassociation.ie. But from me, Hannah Quinn Mulligan, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back again in another 2 weeks.